right, the conclusion of Gooney Bird Greene. I think we've learned a lot about being storytellers and telling stories from this. I wonder, what was that last thing she said? She said, I will tell you how to get stories. Chapter 7. Gooney Bird looked around the classroom. She slid the strap of her cowhide purse from her shoulder and set the purse on the floor below the terrarium table. With her face scrunched into a quiet, thinking expression, she unbuttoned her orange fur jacket and hung it on the back of the chair by her desk. Then she returned to the front of the room and faced the class. She was wearing a blue plaid skirt, a white blouse, black tights, and brown lace-up shoes. There were bright blue hair ribbons in her neatly brushed red hair. She looked ordinary. She looked dignified. She looked wise. Out there, invisible, are a lot of stories not yet told, Gooney Bird told the class. Absolutely true ones? Beanie asked in a small voice. Yes, absolutely true ones. What are they? Beanie asked. Now, do you remember that my first story was called How Gooney Bird Got Her Name? Gooney Bird asked. Yes, Beanie replied. Well, another is called How Beanie Got Her Name. Well, before I was born, Beanie said, laughing, there was a thing called an ultrasound that showed me curled up inside my mom, and I looked just like a bean. And my mom said lima bean, and my dad said no jelly bean, and so that's a fine story beginning, Gooney Bird said. An absolutely true one. You should tell that one on Friday, Beanie. What other invisible stories are out there? Mrs. Pigeon asked. Well, do you remember that my second story was about how I came from China on a flying carpet? Oh my, yes, Mrs. Pigeon said. I had to look up China in the atlas. Out there, invisible and waiting, Gooney Bird said, is a story called... Let me think. She closed her eyes. Is that the title? Let me think, Malcolm asked. No, Gooney Bird opened her eyes. The story is called How Kiko's Family Came to Water Tower. Kiko smiled. Well, they started out in a ship, she said. First, my grandmother and my grandfather got on a big ship in Yokohama and went to Honolulu. They were a little scared because they'd never been to America before. Mrs. Pigeon, you should get the atlas out. Mrs. Pigeon smiled. I will, when you tell your story, Kiko, maybe next Wednesday? Okay, Kiko said, and I'll bring some pictures. And how about if I wear a kimono? That wouldn't be distracting like whiskers, would it? It would be lovely, Gooney Bird said. And I could maybe carry a fan and a parasol. Gooney Bird said gently, that would be a little like whiskers, Kiko. Overdoing it? Kiko asked. Overdoing it, Gooney Bird said. What about me? Asked Barry. Do I have a story? Of course you do, Gooney Bird told him. You have a story called How Barry Got His Name, and how Barry's family came to Water Tower, and lots of others. Barry grinned. Which one should I tell? He asked. Do you remember that my third story was about my diamond earrings? Barry nodded. My suggestion is that when it's your turn, Barry, you should tell an absolutely true story called When Barry Spent Every Penny He Had on Something He Really Wanted Badly. The class waited and watched Barry Tuckerman as he squinched his face together, and then he grinned. Okay, I'll tell it, but it's really, really gross. Oh no, Kiko said. I hate gross. You can cover your ears for Barry's story, Gooney Bird told her. Wear earmuffs that day. Green ones would go nicely with your red sweater, I think. Who else? What else? The class called. Now, my fourth story was called How Gooney Bird Directed an Orchestra. Mrs. Pigeon suggested maybe we could skip that one, Gooney Bird. I know no one in our class has ever led an orchestra. Class, Gooney Bird asked, has anyone here ever been late to school because something quite unusual happened? Almost every hand went up. Malcolm, Gooney Bird said, maybe that story could be your assignment. It could be called Why Malcolm Was Late to School. Aha, it could be about the time I was asleep under my bed and my mom couldn't find me in the morning, Malcolm said. Or the time I dropped my toothbrush in the toilet and when I tried to get it back, oh no! Kiko covered her ears. Don't tell it now and give it away, Malcolm, Gooney Bird said. You work on your story and make it very suspenseful by adding suddenly right in the middle. Gooney Bird looked around the classroom. All the second graders had taken out pencils and papers. They were all writing down ideas for their stories. And remember my last story about Catman? She reminded everyone. Has anyone here ever lost a beloved pet? Almost every hand went up, even Mrs. Pigeon's. Could that be my story, Gooney Bird? Mrs. Pigeon said. I had a parakeet named Brucey, and somehow the door to his cage was left open and next Tuesday, Gooney Bird said, how I lost Brucey. And I found him again, Mrs. Pigeon said with a happy smile. My story has a surprise ending. You know what? Mine will be How I Lost My Gretchen Guinea Pig, Tricia said. Mine has a sad ending. Well, Mrs. Pigeon said, standing up, it's lunchtime already. Let's skip arithmetic today, class. The students put their arithmetic books back in their desk, and they reached for their lunch boxes instead. Gooney Bird took out a grapefruit, a cucumber, and some dill pickles. I'm having a completely vegetarian day today, she explained. But look at this. Dessert for the whole class. She held up a bulky paper bag. What is it? The children asked. Gooney Bird grinned. 63 gumballs, she said. And after I give them out, I'm going to teach you all a wonderful whirling dance called the Tarantella. Suddenly, Felicia Ann looked up from the floor. Shouldn't we all hug and kiss first? She said in a surprisingly loud voice. Thank you for suggesting that, Felicia Ann, Gooney Bird replied. Of course we should. And they did. The end. Wow. I really like that book. And you know, I think Gooney Bird has something to teach us. You know, we've all been through something recently, and that would make some pretty good stories, I think, to tell. You might tell it with pictures or with words or with pictures and words. I think it might be important to share those with your friends, to talk about what you've been doing lately. So, SLVE Bobcats, this concludes Gooney Bird Greene. I can't wait to hear your stories. Take care of yourself.